Tensions are rising at the U.S.-Mexico border near Tijuana after the U.S. government says 1,000 migrants tried to violently cross the border. Authorities arrested 69 migrants who attempted to cross illegally in California. Mexican officials say 98 others are being deported. In Mississippi on Monday, President Trump defended the use of tear gas on migrants, some of whom were children.
First of all, the tear gas is a very minor form of the tear gas itself. It's very safe. The ones that were suffering to a certain extent were the people that were putting it out there, but it's very safe. But you really say, why is a parent running up into an area where they know the tear gas is forming and it's going to be formed, and they're running up with a child?
In his latest column for CBSNews.com, conservative commentator Michael Graham writes that the latest incidents at the border confirm President Trump's claims about the migrant caravan. And Michael Graham joins me now from Boston. He's a CBSN political contributor, columnist for the Boston Herald, and politics editor for NHJournal.com. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Explain to me why you believe the latest incidents at the border confirm what the president and his supporters believe regarding the migrant caravan.
You know, it's so fascinating. If you consume conservative media, if you've been listening to talk radio this week, for example, or going to conservative websites, you saw loop tape after loop tape of people in the media and Democrats saying, Trump is lying about the caravan. There is no caravan. It's thousands of miles away. It's no threat. Why, he makes it sound like they're going to show up at the border and just cut their way through the wall and rush our border crossings. Well, that's pretty much what happened over the weekend. And while President Trump's comments specifically are often, let's say, a little wobbly on details, his broad argument that this caravan approaching and the way it was a blatant statement, as several people in the caravan were quoted on mainstream news outlets like CBS and CNN, we're coming in no matter what. That's been his message, that you really only have two choices on the American side of the border. Democrats essentially say you can come and we're going to do very little to stop you, or you can have Donald Trump because the people who are coming are going to come no matter what, and that's why you need a wall, as a fixed, border enforcement, et cetera. And so what these people were doing was a form of protest. It was a form of anger. But as I said at CBSNews.com, it was also a massive in-kind contribution to the Donald Trump 2020 re-election campaign.
So this was proof, essentially, at basically the president's pretty serious charges as it relates to this issue. He's made some very serious claims regarding the caravan. Some would say without proof. You're saying this is proof of that.
Well, I mean, once again, details. For example, how many what's the phrase he uses, bad hombres, how many bad guys? He has all kinds of crazy numbers, and his supporters who agree with him look past those less than secure numbers at his fundamental argument, which is the caravan is largely men. It's largely young men. The fact is that, as the Homeland Security Secretary said yesterday, children apparently are being used as human shields. The Washington Post, not a friend of President Trump, had a piece a few days ago about the record number of people detained with children at the border. This is a new surge. In the past, illegal immigration was awfully basically young guys coming to look for work who would come maybe by themselves with a coyote or something. Now that number is completely flipped. The illegal immigration by individual men is down. The immigration by family units hit a new record and is up 150%. Even more disturbing is immigration by guys with children, just some guys and a kid. And as the Washington Post reported, in towns in Honduras and Guatemala, you have groups of men getting a child. Some of them, it's a family member. Some, it's a godchild. And according to the Washington Post, some of them aren't related to these men at all because they figured out that the American system will let them in. And because free markets work in everything, Elaine, the coyotes charge half as much if you have a child in your group when they take you up to the border. And these are perverse incentives that in the broad picture, President Trump has been talking about. And for the people who agree with him, they say, aha, see, this is what he was saying all along. And the people who were saying that it was completely fake, that there was no problem at the border, they think look foolish.
So what is then the argument to folks who would look at the images, though, which do include some women and children, and say, whatever the situation, whatever the difficulties, there is trauma that seems to be happening here for these children. We were talking to Jill Colvin earlier of the Associated Press, who said Sarah Sanders notably seemed to take a bit of a different tone when talking about the tear gas. She was at that roundtable where the president said it's very safe tear gas, but Sarah Sanders seemed to acknowledge that there is difficulty for people when they see those images of women and children running from tear gas.
You know, and that's there are two political, because I'm come from the political side, so there are two political forces here. One is that if people who want more border security and support the president ignore these images and ignore the harm and the, you know, children crying, you know, as tear gas wafts over them, or the desperation of these families, it hurts their position politically because no one wants to be on the side of a bunch of mean-spirited jerks. That's a political term we learn in college. On the other side, if the answer from people who oppose President Trump is, well, you can't do anything. They were horrified when President Trump said that the military would be authorized to use lethal force. Well, that's ridiculous. That's outrageous. Okay. Well, then you have a mob of hundreds of people rushing the border, wildly outnumbering the border guards. They use tear gas, which is standard, you know, behavior for crowd control, and people say, well, you can't do that either. Well, if you can't do anything except for just let people come, then that's a tough position. Most Americans want something like a secure border, but they don't want to be mean-spirited while they do it. And those are the two forces that are at work. And so that's the concern.
All right. Michael Graham for us. Michael, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.